Yeah, so what I want to do is I've mulled a bit over the upcoming season. Normally in the past, I would say that this is confidential and to hold it under your hat, but it's not. It's officially announced. It's on the website. So one of the goals here is that maybe I can give you some interesting points that you can take out and evangelize. So one of the ideas behind my little bullet points of Kai's observations is how might you as board members, first of all, get excited yourselves, but what could you tell your friends and other people about what's happening this year at Music at Cole? So I tried to think of that. I did want to say hello to Andrea and Nadine, who I've met, but I don't know very well, so everyone else I know, but it's so nice to see you and welcome to the board. I also wanted to, of course, just send a shout out to the artistic committee. So Ken is on the committee in the room, and Patricia, because of course putting together the season is a monumental effort that takes a lot of time, a lot of listening, a lot of aesthetic considerations, logical considerations, and it's Patricia at the end of the day who does this wild magic to make it all work. So it's always a hair-raising experience, boom, and then the season gels, and here it is. So again, everything you see in this little repertoire sheet is on the website, of course, and in the brochure. The brochure now being projected up there. And it's kind of a cheat sheet for me. So what I want to do is just kind of talk you through some key points. I always like to start at the top and give some sort of overall numbers. I'm not really a numbers person, but it helps. As you know, we have 8 concerts. This is excluding our children's concerts and others. 7 subscription concerts plus 1 holiday gala event. 8 pre-concert talks. So I will be speaking before every single concert. So right away you can say to folks, hey, it's a full immersion, come for the show, but come a half an hour earlier and get, a walkthrough of what's going to be presented. We also have, if I counted right, and Patricia, if I say anything wrong, jump in and correct me, we are, continuing and even, I think, expanding our wonderful partnership with Susan Bates and Young Chamber Musicians. So we have 6 master classes this year. So that means that 6 of the 8 events is a master class with this inside coaching where you get to see the starring artists from the main stage come out, interact with the kids, give them pointers, tear the music apart, talk about it, wax poetic. You can be an audience of this little mini scene. Then you can take a little break. I'll give you a pre-concert talk. You take another break again, the concert, and then of course at the end this wonderful after-concert party with food and refreshment. So it's this crazy, multimedia event. And if you haven't been to a master class, I really encourage you. It's so interesting. Not only to see the incredible amount of work. I was thinking to myself the other day about one of the reasons why I love this music as opposed to, and this is not to put anyone down, but some punk band you might hear in the Mission in San Francisco. Is when you go see a punk band, there's a good chance someone smoked a joint and picked up a guitar the day before. Whereas when you come to hear Music at Cole Mansion, you're seeing musicians that have studied meticulously for 30 years, 50 years. And this is a lifelong passion. It takes years of maturity. I mean, first of all, raw talent of an incredible sort, patience, concentration, and then something that you see in the master class. Well, you're darn good. You play way better than I could ever if I tried for the rest of my entire life, but you're not even there yet. So you gain insight into really the kind of preciousness of this talent and what goes into this art to play, at the end of the day, a beautiful Beethoven string quartet. It's a very, very, not elitist, that's the wrong word, but it's like watching an Olympic athlete. It takes such extraordinary skill, commitment, and years of cultivation to be able to play a Beethoven string quartet. And that's partly why it's such a beautiful thing, and you see that in the master classes. So 6 of the 8 shows this year, you can come for that as well. And I think we've had very good attendance, and it's been rising. Richard can, if you pin him in the corner, he'll wax poetic about his experience at the master class. So I just wanted to point that out. One of the things I noticed in looking at the repertoire, the ensembles, is something that you always want in great music, which as our season has balance, it has color, it has variety, and also has some real adventure into it, which I'm going to highlight. So we've got 4 string quartets, great. We have 1 string quintet, so Jerry is going to come back, and I'll talk about her in just a moment. And she's bringing a hand-picked string quartet that she thinks is absolutely fabulous, emerging. And she's going to join them for a quintet, which is always wonderful. 2 piano trios. A 3rd piano trio, which you could call that, but it features a clarinet. So we're bringing in this wonderful instrument, not once, but twice. We'll have the clarinet featured in another concert with the Israeli Chamber Project. We have 4 concerts this year featuring a piano. Many folks love the piano and are interested in that, so it's good to know we've got literally 50% of our shows will feature the piano. As I mentioned, 2 featuring the clarinet and 1 featuring the harp. So this is yet another beautiful instrument to throw into the mix. Tons of color, tons of variety of ensemble happening. What are they going to be playing? We're going to have plenty of classics: Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Mendelssohn, Schumann, Brahms, Smetana, Dvorak, Bruch, Liszt, Saint-Saëns, and Fauré. I think all of these you could, we could get down to the fine points, but all of them fit into the realm of the great classical composers. More contemporary, we have Ives, Shostakovich, Erwin Schulhoff, Bohuslav Martinu, and Jean Francais. Another, all of them 20th century composers. And then if you really want to get, not necessarily edgy, but really contemporary, William Bolcom, American, Joan Tower, an American, both of them still alive. Osvaldo Golikhov, who's also alive. And the last 2 I do not know. They are new composers that are actually coming with the ensemble. So some of the ensembles will be featuring compositions by their own players. So again, we've got a really wonderful load of classics, some contemporary, and again, if you talk to some chamber people, they will say, Ives and Shostakovich, that's ancient music. What do you mean? It depends on your ears. And by the same token, although Joan Tower and William Bolcom are good examples, are more contemporary than Shostakovich, it doesn't mean they're unbearable. There's a wonderful sort of new wave of romanticism. It's actually cool for composers to write a melody nowadays, which wasn't really the case in 1950. After this, in addition to kind of the stock and trade of quote-unquote classical music, we have, if you look at the program, some interesting popular and folk infusions as well, for even more variety. And I think, if I remember, we saw some of this last year with Classical Jam, and some of our audience really loved it, really loved a little slant in that direction. So we're going to have more this year. One of the ensembles, I'm forgetting the names of exactly who's doing what, and that's not important. Someone is going to be doing their own arrangement of folk songs of the 60s and 70s. I can hardly wait. Yeah, I can hardly wait to see what they're going to pick. I already have picks in my head. I hope they do this. We're going to hear, especially delightful, an arrangement of the Buena Vista Social Club music. And this is this incredible band of musicians that was found in Cuba and recorded by Ry Cooder and brought out. Fabulous Cuban music. Oh, yeah, is that right?
At Mountain Winery.
Absolutely.
Are you going?
Super fabulous. And it'll be interesting because that in itself, if you watch them, that's a kind of chamber music without a doubt. And then, of course, I just mentioned ragtime because, again, William Bolcom, who's an American composer, is famous for his pianism and his composition of ragtime pieces. Wait, did I ever kick off my timer? You'll tell me. You'll tell me. Because I could talk for hours.
Plenty of time.
Okay, good. And I kicked it off, too. So we'll be hearing some ragtime pieces as well, all nicely within the mix. So, again, balance, variety, and some adventure. I didn't specifically call it out. I'll mention it as we get there. There's so much to say. And by the way, I will run out of time. I will have much more to say with each concert as the pre-concert talks approach. So have no fear. After this, I just wanted to call out other things that really struck me in the season that I'm very excited about. Our opening concert is the Cavani String Quartet. We've had many times. We absolutely love them. They're fabulous. They're great with students, great performers, and they put together really thoughtful programs. Patricia and I actually had some extended conversations, trying to mold and put together a program that worked for all of us. And I think we've achieved something really interesting this year. So the opening night is kind of a hop, skim, to jump through the history of the string quartet. It will include a piece by Haydn from his original Opus 33 set, which is considered to be really the arrival of the modern string quartet in 1780-ish. So we're going to hear what was considered the first thing where people said, wow, that is a string quartet. We're going to begin with that. We're going to end the show with Joan Tower, who's a living American composer. So we're going from an Austrian, man to an American woman who's going to give us this really edgy, intense piece called Night Fields. And I've had the opportunity to interview her and talk to her before, and I've heard, her string quartets, absolutely amazing. And then in between, we're going to hear these wonderful little contrasting pieces where we have Dvorak and his little miniatures called the Cypresses, and then Erwin Schulhoff, who was influenced by Dvorak, and a little set of his miniatures. So it's really going to be a very interesting and revealing, exploration of what is the string quartet. And even though it started in 1780, it's still completely viable in America right now today. So I'm very excited about this program. After that, again, just pulling out threads. An unusual, from what I remember of our past, highlight on American composers. So we're going to hear two pieces from Charles Ives. Now, Charles Ives, if you don't know him, I've just got to mention him. I don't think we've programmed him in a long time. Charles Ives is just one of these incredible, genius. He's like I don't know what he is. A brilliant composer who anticipated many of the avant-garde revolutions that came from European art music, but he kind of invented them himself first, living in his house in Connecticut, because he worked during the day as an insurance salesman. So he was trained in music. He had extensive training as a musician and was very accomplished. It's not like he was a random amateur. But he was sort of like Emily Dickinson. He wrote stuff and threw it in the drawer, wrote stuff and threw it in the drawer. And he made a fortune in the insurance business. And then slowly but surely his music started being published. And in retrospect, he's come to be regarded as the first 20th century avant-garde composer. And his music, interestingly, is thoroughly American. It's saturated with American hymns, band music, melodies that you might know, but put together in really interesting ways. And we're going to hear this season, interestingly, two pieces from him. We're going to hear one of his string quartets, which he wrote during his student years, and then we're going to hear a piano trio of his. So I'm very excited to hear Ives. Again, he's challenging, but fabulous, and he's American, so we need to get to know him. But we're also going to hear from William Boecklam, as I mentioned, and Joan Tower. So we have three American composers, two of them living, which I think is an interesting highlight this year. It's a Mendelssohn highlight this year. We're going to hear three different works of Mendelssohn scattered throughout the season. And who doesn't adore Mendelssohn? Half of this talk I was thinking of speaking to Ernest, and I'm sorry that he's not here. Ernest, Mendelssohn will be in the house. The perfect musician, right? Mendelssohn. So we're going to hear a string quartet with Jerry, a string quintet, and a piano trio. And I love when a composer is highlighted and we get to hear some variety. Different ensembles, maybe different periods of their life. And with Mendelssohn, we're going to hear, his two piano trios are like, if someone says, what in God's name is chamber music? One of the first things I do is say, listen to a Mendelssohn piano trio, because they're exquisite, they're perfect. Everyone's guaranteed to love them. But in contrast, we're going to hear his last string quartet that he wrote after he heard about the death of his sister, who was a very close friend. They were colleagues, compatriots, and siblings. He absolutely just went through this terrible despair and depression, wrote this fiery, urgent kind of string quartet, and that was it. That was the last thing he ever wrote. So we're going to hear these two sides of him that are really fabulous. So we have a Mendelssohn highlight, again for Ernest and for everyone. We have a Beethoven highlight. It's almost required because he just is the thing. He's the top. And we're going to hear two string quartets, one early one of the magnificent, groundbreaking Razumovsky quartets, Opus 59, and then his piano trio, The Ghost, which is really, truly one of my favorite Beethoven pieces of all time. It's two beautiful, sparkling pieces, and then in the middle, this completely frightening, depressing, like, oh my God, where did that come from? And that's why it gets its name, the nickname The Ghost, because it sounds like a horror movie on the inside. You'll absolutely love it. It's super, super fabulous. Czech Please, another thread that comes out is we have 4 Czech composers this year. And if you don't know, the Bohemian and Moravian composers are really known as the truly great composers of the world. Even in the Viennese days, when Haydn and Mozart were big, it was a lot of the conductors and a lot of the players were known to be Czech and Moravian, at the time Bohemian and Moravian, because for some reason, whatever's in the water there, that's where the great musicians come from. So we're going to hear, of course, Smetana, which is he's kind of the nationalistic father of classical Czech music. Then after him, Dvorak. Then after him, Martinu, who you probably don't know. He wrote absolutely wonderful music, a little bit spiky in the 20th century sense. And then Erwin Schulhoff, again, who's writing this divertimento that we're going to hear. But have no fear, there's even more. We have a French thread, so we have Saint-Saëns, Fauré, and Francais. And I mentioned Francais because he's in Kai's list of special favorites. These are not to exclude any other great masterworks, like the Ghost Trio is a good example, which I adore. But other things that stand out that are really I'm really, really looking forward to this year. Golihov, who's Argentine, I think, living. He has written tons of great music, and this one piece, Tenebrae, that he wrote, I've heard it played multiple times. I even gave a talk on it once. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's one of these pieces where you're like, wow, they still write music. That's, it's like Adagio, Samuel's Barber's Adagio. It's just, you'll hear that piece and you'll think, I want a half an hour of silence to just let it really sink in, even though it's absolutely contemporary. Shostakovich, I love him. Some people don't love him. But what's interesting this year is, and I've literally waited 15 years to hear this piece, we're going to hear his first piano trio. He was 17. Now, he was in St. Petersburg at the time, going to a conservatory. There was no money, there was no food, there was no heat. And so he went to this conservatory. He started like in his 16, because of course he was a crazy musical genius. And he's, sort of starving and freezing and wearing those hands, those gloves that go over his hands. And he writes this piano trio. Now, this piano trio is quite possibly the greatest piece of juvenilia I've ever heard in my life. Meaning, let's look at all the great composers. What did they do when they were kids? Now, Mendelssohn is famous, but this thing is extraordinary. It's extraordinary because it is super original. It's really a fascinating piece of music. Like, it's not, some Shostakovich is really intense. Well, this is intense. But it's full of melody, it's full of wonderful stuff. It's a shorter piece. But what I love about it is it's not only great, and then you listen to it and it's even better because you see how it's put together and you listen to it, but it reveals his complete personality, his complete musical personality. He was 17, and all the innovative stuff that he would do until the end of his life in his 60s is right there in this piece of music. And of course, the administrators at the St. Peter's Conservatory did not like this piece of music. They thought it was, no. Wait till you hear it. It's absolutely fabulous. So I'm very excited about that. I didn't mention Francais I love as well. I've gotten to know his music over the last several years. French, I think he maybe died very recently, decade or so ago. What did you say, Thursday? But I have to mention him because, again, the middle of the 20th century had this really scary intellectual approach to music that alienated everyone, and frankly, a lot of the music was really horrible. Francais said, I just want to make music that is beautiful and makes people happy. He was Nadia Boulanger, who was this incredible pedagogue in Paris. Everyone went to study with her, many Americans, many Europeans. Her favorite student. So he comes highly recommended. Again, his idea was, schools, who cares? Is it pleasurable? All of his music is so delightful. It's French, it's accessible, it's tonal. It'll just put a big smile on your face. So he's another one that we need to get to know. One of the things I didn't mention on this list that isn't itemized is the return of Jerry Walther. So many of you who have a long-time association with music at Cole will know that Jerry was one of our favorite musicians for so many years. She was principal violist with the San Francisco, she was principal, wasn't she? San Francisco Symphony Orchestra. She came many times with the Fog Trio and played here. I had the opportunity when she wasn't, sort of super world famous to, chat with her sometimes. Such a delightful individual, great violist. Well, then she's snatched up by the Takacs Quartet, which is, arguably one of the finest string quartets in the world for a long time. And boom, they grabbed her, and we hardly ever see her anymore. She's coming back this year. And she is bringing, and Patricia can speak to this if I'm not mistaken, she said there is this group that I've encountered, that I'm working with, who is probably the best string quartet I've seen emerging as a young quartet. And so she is coming with them. So it's kind of a twofer, right? We get Jerry back, but we're also going to get to experience this brand new emerging quartet, and then they'll play together in the Mendelssohn Quintet. So that's a very exciting event on the program. What I said here was we have 4.5 because remember Jerry is 0.5 old, the Altius Quartet is 0.5 new. So we have 4.5 returning, 3.5 new, 2 international ensembles, and I think that may hit everything. The last thing I put here in my notes is that there's a special treat in every concert. Now often you come to a chamber concert and there's Mozart, Beethoven, Shostakovich or something. And I'll leave it as an exercise for the listener, but you can also look at my little cheat sheet. I went through the concerts, and in every single concert, there was at least one thing that I checked as, ooh, that's kind of a treat. And I'll give the last one away. The Trio con Brio Copenhagen, by the way, one of our favorites, also returning. They're doing the Shostakovich, so that's the treat, and that's more of a personal treat. Every other concert, though, there's at least one item where it's like, wow, that's kind of an interesting, curious draw. I mentioned we're going to hear some pieces here by a few composers. I don't know at all. Some of the composers are in the ensembles themselves. And like I say, some other things that I myself have to research and get to know. But by the time the concert arrives, I will. And I think I've hit all my points. So I think there's tons to look forward to, all kinds of angles. I believe there's something for everyone. There's favorites returning, new stuff to check out. It's by a long shot, not just the same old fare. But in fact, a very exciting, as I mentioned, collection that's balanced, that has color, virtuosity, and some challenges, some adventure. But we want it that way, because that's how we discover new music. So I'll leave it there if you have any questions that strike you. Otherwise, as I mentioned, I'll have much more to say as the concerts approach.